of Corporate Governance, NICG for short. We are pleased to invite you to the next edition of our Fireplace Conversations, where we bring together experts and thought leaders to unpack key governance issues shaping Namibia's future. Join us as we unpack governing in crisis, exploring how boards, executives, and organizations can apply sound governance principles during periods of financial distress, business disruption, institutional pressure, and uncertainty. Host Edla Kaumbi will be joined by Dr. Esther and Shiwana Ndeunyema for this important conversation. Tune in at 18:30 to watch it live on the NICG and the Namibian Facebook pages, or to attend in person, reserve your seat by contacting 081 666 8645 or email training.events@nicg.org.na. Fireplace Conversations is proudly supported by 91 Namibia.
Should I go? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the NICG Fireplace Conversations. My name is Edla Kaumbi, the Executive Director of the NICG, Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance. Thank you for being here. We have a full house here today, and thank you for those of you who are tuning in online. Tonight, we are talking about governance, but not governance when things are going well. We're talking about governance when things are not so easy, when resources are scarce, and when making a decision is really tough. But before we get into it, we need to thank the partner for tonight, 91, leading investment manager in the country and across the continent. Thank you for making the series possible. They sponsored the whole series, and they show us that governance is not just about compliance and ethics, little check boxes, but it's about sustainable development and making sure that, we lead well. So thank you so much, 91. Tonight, I have two guests whose experience of crisis is real. It's not just on paper. They experience it personally. Dr. Esther, who leads Letseho as the Chief Executive since November 2014, when she joined from FNB Namibia, where she served as Head of Retail and Business Banking. Under her leadership, Letseho Bank Namibia obtained its banking license, a landmark achievement, and the organization has grown into one of Namibia's most significant inclusive finance institutions, with deposits exceeding 1.1 billion Namibian dollars and a diversified product offering spanning banking services, personal loans, and home finance. When the Ministry of Finance directed Letseho to suspend all new deductions at source loans for government employees, a product that had been central to Letseho's business model, Dr. Kali's response was measured, confident, and grounded in a diversification strategy she had been building since 2016. This is what governance-led resilience looks like in practice. She holds over 25 years of banking industry experience, has served as chairperson of the Payments Association of Namibia, and is a recipient of the United Nations Global Women Foundation Woman of Distinction Award. And for me, she is Dr. May Kali, because we come from FNB. Welcome, Dr. Kali.
Nice to be here.
My second guest has lived crisis governance from one of the most complex vantage points imaginable, inside Namibia's national oil company at one of the most consequential and challenging moments in its history. Shiwana Ndeunyema serves as Executive Business Strategy and Performance at NAMCOR, the National Petroleum Corporation of Namibia. He previously served as Acting Managing Director, a role he was called to into short notice, and has been at the center of NAMCOR's efforts to position Namibia as a credible player in what could become one of the most significant oil and gas sectors on the continent. Under his stewardship, NAMCOR partnered with Shell, Total Energies, and Qatar Energy on major oil discoveries, including the Venus, Graf, and Nyanyonka wells. He serves on the NAMPORT board, is chairperson of Beki Kumata Fishing, and holds a Master of Science in HR with specializations in organizational behavior and performance management from Edinburgh Business School. He has spoken and written publicly about natural resource governance and institutional positioning, and he knows what it means to navigate an institution under scrutiny while trying to build its future at the same time. Mr. Ndeunyema, welcome. It's not your first fireplace. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers.
King 4 tells us that governance is not a set of just structures. It's about outcomes. And I think if you've tuned in more than once, you know that we anchor our conversations in what the outcomes of governance are. And the 4 outcomes tell us that, it's ethical culture, good performance, value creation, conformance, and prudent control, and legitimacy. These are the outcomes when we govern. These outcomes, I think we can say, are easily achievable in good times, but they don't become less important when we're governing in crisis. So tonight is about that. It's not, governing in abstraction, but it's when we are being tested whether we still have the outcomes. So when we use the word crisis, we use it fairly loosely. But for you, it's been real. What does it actually feel like to lead an organization through crisis? You can start. Anyone can start. Then you must start with you. What does it feel like to lead it in crisis?
Right. Thank you very much. The first thing that crisis does is that it compresses time, right? So decisions that would ordinarily take weeks to make suddenly need to be made in hours. And it has the potential to bankrupt character because you're under pressure, and there's that potential or temptation to sort of take the shortcut, the short route. I recall vividly on one occasion, it was 9/11, when the Twin Towers were attacked. President George Bush at the time was sitting in front of an audience of preschool children. And one of his security personnel came to him and whispered in his ear that one of the planes went into the Twin Tower. Of course, one would imagine that it's an accident. And the second time around, the special agent came. He said another tower has come onto the Twin Towers. Another plane has come into the Twin Towers. And his initial response was, who the hell would dare to attack America? And when he looked up, he saw the face of innocence, children, and that's when he realized that he needed to project calm. So that's the first lesson that I learned, that calm is contagious, because as the leader steering the ship, you need to demonstrate calm, and that calm comes with confidence. And of course, for me and the team, it was quite the opposite. You called in to lead when it's not necessarily, enjoying calm waters, the stormy waters. There were governance questions. There was intense media scrutiny. Employee morale was uncertain. Stakeholders wanted answers. Markets were watching. As you rightfully indicated, we were just at the cusp of significant oil discoveries. Government was watching. Our international partners were watching. And perhaps most importantly, every employee was asking that silent question, will we be okay?
Yeah.
And that in many respects is what governing in crisis really means. Not managing headlines, but managing confidence.
Wow, thank you. Is there something you want to add to that?
I see. If I look at crisis normally feels like everybody needs an answer. Everybody needs an answer from you at the same time. Even when you don't have the answer. I think to an extent we have normalized this. Normally when you want something like in yesterday, you say, I want it like in yesterday. I remember during COVID, looking at my employees, they were worried. They were worried about their health. They were worried about their jobs. And looking at customers, they were under pressures. And the business still needed to operate. So my learnings from there was, you needed to communicate more. You needed to take decision even if you don't have all the necessary information. Additionally to that, what was critical is that you needed to continue to adjust. Then come the PDMS, the Payment Deduction Management System. It disrupts with a different dynamics, a different pressure, for example. So here you have a business, your core business is now sent in a different direction. In both those two cases, you have people that are first looking at you as a leader for calmness. They are looking for direction. What changed during crisis is the speed to what you act, and it's not your values. Your values cannot change. You might have to take decision earlier, as Shiwana has alluded to. It can take an hour, it can take weeks, but you must still be honest, you must still be fair, and you must still be accountable. Sometimes the most responsible words we as leaders can say is that what they know, because it's critical. Sometimes we want to hide away what they can do and what they have to do next. So in crisis, people might forget all these spreadsheets you have, all the guidelines, but they remember whether the leadership was calm, whether the leadership was there, and whether the leadership was honest.
That's really good. Thank you so much. I mean, while we're there with you, I mean, you're talking about this DAS loans that was, suspended, and that was serious business disruption. But you said you had prepared for this already. What did preparation actually look like? Yes, please talk to that.
So before I go to preparation, and we didn't predict that the exact date is going to be on this particular day. Neither did we even have it in our mind that it's going to happen at the time. I remember I was in Botswana. It was on my birthday when I received this letter. And the letter was saying, you have to stop us off this day. But the beauty of this is we knew long ago that it was risky to depend on one product. It was risky to have one payment channel, for example. Just like a household. If you have a household and you have just one person who's earning a salary, one strong source can be vulnerable. It's a concentration risk. In Letseho, we have already identified way before. So joining Letseho 2014, the mandate was clear. So we geared ourselves towards diversification. We look at what we needed to do because we realized we could not have our eggs in one basket. So we started with diversification, transforming from micro lending to obtaining our banking license in 2016. And that gave us a leeway to be able to bring wider products, deposit, looking at digital channels, and also looking at stronger risk management. So our foundation was really supported by a strong digital capabilities. So a journey from micro lending to being a bank, then a listed entity, had already taught us that we needed to strengthen our systems, we needed to be transparent being a listed entity, and we needed to be accountable. Through that, the discussion, particularly in the boardroom, has always been, what if today's strongest product or your strongest incomes disappear tomorrow? So here is the thing. You do not build fire on engine while the house is burning. You need to do it long ago.
Really good. Thank you. Is there something you wanted to add to that? That's pretty good. No? Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, no, really well answered. I'm going to go to you next anyway, because you faced significant institutional and governance challenges while simultaneously sitting on what we said in consequential possible oil discoveries. So how do you manage well? How do you do governance well while you are under scrutiny, under so much pressure? What does that look like? How do you manage that? How do you balance? How do you prepare for the future strategically and build for it when you are under so much scrutiny?
Yeah. Fantastic. I think it's just important just to put your initial introductory remarks in context. The discoveries weren't made during my tenure of acting. Of course, it was important to manage stakeholders because it was during that time where we were, exploring appraisal campaigns to assess whether there is actually commercial viability in these discoveries. The discoveries were actually during my predecessor at the time, Mr. Emmanuel Mulunga. So during times of crisis, I think the first thing to Esther's point, Doctor, you have to walk with two canisters. On the one hand, you have your water and fertilizer, so you must keep growing, So you can't keep growing to focus on putting out the fire. So that's the first thing. Strategy doesn't go through the door. In fact, it becomes more important because whatever decision you make, you must appreciate the long-term impact. Otherwise, you're going to end up in another crisis. So values, Doctor made an important point. Values become your compass. They become cardinal because it doesn't remove the storm, but it stops you from losing direction. I think that is very important. And one of the most important values is honesty and integrity during a crisis. And at the center of that is really communication. Okay, so one of the first things that we did was to conduct a diagnostic on the state of the institution. And that's when some of those discoveries were essentially made. And when you know that governance is broken or it's absent is when bad news stops being communicated upwards in any organization. So it's important to face the facts and the reality. The sooner you face the bad news, the earlier you can make strategic choices. And I'm a reader, so I'd like very metaphorical when and I believe that's how people essentially learn. So there's a gentleman by the name of Alan Mulally. He was appointed in 2006 when Ford was going through some of its largest annual losses, losing billions, and the crisis was deepening. And then they brought him in to stabilize the ship and course correct. And he introduced what he referred to as weekly executive business review meetings, where everyone had to report on the status of their projects. And he quickly realized when he came in that everybody was reporting green. And Mulally obviously knew that, the reality was different because the numbers were not just adding up. Until one day, one executive eventually reported red. And to his surprise, he expected criticism, but he received applause, and the question he asked was, how can we help? So the culture shifted from fear to that of transparency. So when bad news became valuable information, things started to turn around. So governance needs the truth early. So you cannot govern when people fear to communicate bad news. So crisis, transparency, it builds trust, allows for better decisions, and eventually better governance. So the biggest governance risk for me isn't bad news. It's when bad news arrives too late. Yeah. So you would have appreciated during that time, we've really made an effort to communicate. Well, obviously, Esther is in a different situation because she reports to investors. We're operating a public institution and we're accountable to the public. Yeah. So the board was very supportive at the time. And we agreed to go out in public and share the reality. We could have chosen to hide those numbers from the public, but we felt it was important to face the reality and look past that and see how we can turn around the entity essentially. So the key is to communicate bad news early and get it out of the way.
Yeah. I'm really loving this, and I hope you are too, and just such meaty conversation. And I hope as they are sharing, we're hearing the nuances about governance, that we're hearing risk management, we're hearing stakeholder engagement, we're hearing prudent control and, value creation. That's really good. Thank you so much. And you answered the question I was going to ask next about ethical culture, one that actually looks like, I don't know if you want to add to that, when resources are constrained, when things are tight, because you talked about honesty and integrity, you talked about transparency, and you explained transparency in terms of, communicating bad news. Is there something you want to add to that? Because I wanted to go to the next question.
I forget to say that, ethics is easy when doing the right things at the zero rate. However, the real test really do come in when the right decision is slower, it's more expensive, it's unpopular. So, and as leaders, we are sometimes tempted to, during that time, to be able to hide bad news. And I think Shiwana mentioned it. We want to protect the number. We want to transfer the pains to either customers or to the staff. At the end of the day, who's going to suffer? What we do at Let's Go, we go beyond asking some question. can we do this under crisis? Can we do this? Should we do this? That is critical to me. And also what we ask ourselves is to say, if we have to do is, who's going to be most implicated? At the end of the day, your staff learns culture by watching what leaders are tolerating. They watch you by looking at what are you rewarding and what is the correct thing you are doing. So your values as a leader is not what you say during the right time or during the good time. It's really what you protect during the difficult time.
So good. And you touched on, the essence of ethical culture, stakeholder, like the impact of decisions on stakeholders, that's, fairness and, so really, really good. And I think I want to go to the next thing. When you started in the beginning, you talked about, that what doesn't change, values don't change, but it's the speed of the decisions, they change. So what does that look like? And because I'm thinking, King 5 talks about prudent control, right? So it's, wise judgment, good judgment, and, sort of saying that it's not about speed, but it's about, wise decision. How do you balance that, speed does not become a governance risk? And, is it good governance?
So firstly, you need to understand that tighter decision, as you rightly is tighter decision making in a crisis can either be good corporate governance, or it can be bad corporate governance. Sometimes, as you rightly say, decision need to be faster, but faster doesn't mean that you need to be unaccountable. So if I remember during the deduction at source disruption, we compress governance, but not in the bad way, where we had to frequently meet with the board of director instead of doing it on a quarterly basis. Right. We have to put clearer governance structure in place, delegated of authority. We have to report to the board of director, and we have to record each and every decision that we were taking. So there is a difference between streamlining and the difference of bypassing. What we have done, as much as we were streamlining, we were still complying with the corporate governance. We were not just bypassing, because when you bypass, it means that you are bringing in fewer people to take decision, but you are not holding records. The true line is crossed when we have to move from, no, we needed to do it quickly. That's why we didn't have to check it. You can't hide behind crisis. You need to ensure that you still have those strong corporate governance. It cannot be thrown out of the window.
It's really good. Thank you. Is there something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think Esther is really just nailing it. I'm here for a lecture. So, so I think, sometimes, we have this perception that when, in times of crisis, we need to compromise on governance, and specifically in terms of the boundaries of governance. There's a perception sometimes that the board must become now operational. In fact, that's when we actually have to observe governance. And one of the challenges that executives and board members have is that you have, like I've indicated, limited time, limited information to make the decision. But when in the future, executives and boards of directors are actually judged not on the limited information they had and the limited time they had, but with the new information that comes after the decision was made, which I think is unfair. When judging a decision, you must judge it on the basis upon which the decision was made with the information that they had at the time. I think that's very important. I think the other point that I wanted to make is that governance is not a solution to anything. It doesn't take away solving the crisis. Governance is essentially like a guardrail. It just helps you remain on track so that you don't fall off the cliff. And when your decisions are questioned, you can actually advise the process that you essentially followed, especially when the outcome is adverse. Yeah,
really, really good. So good. I hope you guys are doing the clocking thing. I think the other thing that King 4 talks about, or King 5, both, they talk about, King 5 actually brought this in terms of, good performance. But, it's not just about good performance, but it's about value creation. And when you're in crisis, maybe value creation might feel like a luxury. How do you still hold on to that when you're in survival mode? Who reminds you, who reminds the board what it is there to do ultimately? Any one of you can go first.
I think I will say, while survival matters, what is important is that it cannot be destroyed through numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot be destroyed through numbers, because the moment you, for example, look at saving your numbers, you can equally also destroy the company, because trust become an issue. So during in this process where we are going through the payment management system, the payment deduction management system, it requires us to protect the institution, but also while listening to our customer, while having conversation with our employees, also our regulator, our investors. That is critical. So stakeholder engagement is critical. What is also critical during this is your purpose. Why do you exist? Because your purpose must remain the lens of the major decision you are taking. Our purpose within Letseho is improving lives through financial inclusion, and it did not disappear through crisis. The crisis we are going through, it didn't disappear. We still continue to maintain that honesty. We still continue to have those honest conversations about our purpose with the independent directors, our committees, and the stakeholder. And what the feedback we are receiving is helping us, and critically also to provide those honest management reporting. Being a listed entity is also about transparency. So a healthy balance sheet is critical, is essential, but trust is also an asset. The moment you lost it or poor, it's going to be very difficult to rebuild that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that leads into the next question, which I was going to ask you, about legitimacy. Because one thing that can happen that can be eroded is legitimacy. And the characteristics you mentioned about transparency and about trust speak to legitimacy. Is there something that you wanted to add, and what a board should do, if it's lost, this trust is lost, how can it even be rebuilt? Can it be rebuilt at all?
Yeah. Certainly. But before I attempt to respond to that question, I'd just like to add my 2 cents to Esther's point around value during crisis. Without going into the details, leave the details where they belong.
Yes.
When we developed our turnaround strategy, it was a 3-pronged turnaround strategy. The first one was survive. So if you don't survive, there'll be no tomorrow, right? So there'll be no value. Survive. And then second was stabilize. Right? Stabilize the entity, make sure that we're not having any leakages any longer. And third is position for long-term position for long-term sustainability. And I think secondly, whilst you position in your strategy, it's important that you protect the institutional purpose. The last thing you want is a redundancy campaign from, in Esther's case, from your investors pulling out, or from your shareholder, in our instance, declaring the entity irrelevant and dissolving.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, of course, stakeholders remain critical, taking your stakeholders along with you. And with those 3 points, it's important to think beyond today's crisis. To answer your question around legitimacy, so trust is earned, right? Trust is earned. We know trust is earned. Some people believe that we give you the benefit of the doubt, and if you disappoint me, but the reality is trust is earned. Everybody has a bit of suspicion.
Yeah.
But transparency restores that confidence. The transparency is usually embedded in accurate and factual and reliable communication. And communication must be consistent. We often see what we refer to in governance school as information apathy. So either management is not sharing information timelessly with the board, or the right information with the board. And we've seen it happen in multiple organizations, and this is not specific to any institution really.
Yeah.
And then of course, actions over promises. So people just want you to do, they don't want you, to make promises. I think actions really, at the end of the day, embed legitimacy in any relationship. It's not just a board management relationship, also management staff. If you make promises to your staff and those are not honored, for sure, you will have that erosion of trust.
It's really, really good. Is there something you wanted to add to that?
I think it's well captured.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is really, really good. But now I wanted to maybe go to our audiences and our viewers online. Do you have any thoughts, any comments here in the room? You're just looking pretty and I don't have comments and questions. Yes, I have a hand here. Please introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Augusto Chikwambi. I'm a member of the NICG, working for the Office of the Auditor General. And really, it gives me pleasure really to find myself in this cohort of fellow learned colleagues. I really applaud that, and as well as the management of the NICG. Perhaps really to go deeper to say, it's a different conversation that we have on the pavilion outside the court than when we are actually inside the court. Of course, when we are inside the court, it's a level of really raising and questioning the attitude that we have, as well as the behavior, being able to maintain that, and considering the why that brought us in the play field. And as well, not just understanding our why, but for really us to have sustainable development, we need to understand as well the why of our stakeholders. And that's why engagement is really important. So for me, really, I'm very grateful for this conversation. But really back to the participant, it's really the question of, in the most frustrating moments when really the road was quite uncertain, how did you maintain the level of your attitude, the level of the behavior from leadership, such that you still maintain your governance outcome, where people look out for your ethical leadership, still maintaining your performance, even when things are not going right? So I would like to pose that question. And really, because as a leader, it's not really what we are receiving, neither good or bad, but it's what we are not actually being told in the room. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Augustine. Thank you for always supporting the NICG. Do you, any one of you want to take that?
So, quite an interesting question and a very good question. I think I would want to respond it from a point of your value systems. Value doesn't change. At the end of the day, it's all about transparency. It's about what you do in the darkness, or also what you do in the room full of lights. So as a leader, remember, you can't hide things away. Through a crisis, you need to be transparent. You need to believe in your value system. If it's going bad, you can't change your value system. Equally, if it's going well, you can't change your value system. You need to stick to the value system that you prescribe to or subscribe to. That's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you so much. Did you want to add?
Yeah, no, important question. That's a very, very important question. Leadership is not easy, right? It's not easy because everybody is watching you and watching your every decision. And in some instances, you may make decisions with the best of intentions, but they might be the wrong intentions, wrong decisions. So it's important that whatever decision is made is embedded in your philosophical value system, as Esther has alluded to. And at the end of the day, that serves as your moral compass. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really good. Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm getting a really hearty meal tonight. The next question is about warning signs and the hard lessons. Many organizations, they govern in a state of informal crisis before they reach the point of formal intervention, whether it's business rescue, regulatory action, public scrutiny. What are the early warning signs that governance is failing, and critically, what should a board do when it sees them before it's too late? Who wants to go first? Shiwana?
Right. So the first sign that things are going wrong from a government's perspective is when bad news stops traveling. Bad news needs to travel. And there's no organization without bad news. Of course, bad news varies in different organizations. Second is when silence replaces the challenge, right? And the culture weakens and small issues become crisis. That's the early sign that there's a governance failure. I was actually interested to hear from Esther, because I think our issue was a little different. In your instance, you had 2016, what I would imagine as a business continuity plan, right? For sure, there were some early signs, and in this particular case, it was a little different. So I'm quite keen to hear what were those early signs, because you mentioned that you were surprised when you got the message and there was a date attached to it.
There wasn't a date.
Yeah, no, I think the beauty of the early signs, we knew the payment deduction management system will go away. It was just a matter of time, but we didn't anticipate. Unfortunately, I'm not a prophet. I could not see the date. But as I said, most crises, when they begin, it doesn't just begin when they become public. It has already started. There are lights that are flickering somewhere that this is going to happen. I want to use an analogy of governance can also be at home. I want to use an analogy of you are at home, right? Every time you are passing by a tap that is leaking, and that tap, when it's leaking, you say, I'll do it tomorrow, and you don't do it until the city of Windhoek bill come out, and then you want to ask yourself, how can I pay this? So what we need to do is we really need to watch for the known risk that are never fixed. We knew within the deduction at source is a matter of time. We could not rely on only one product. That's why the diversification strategy, and also bad news arriving late as sometimes soften. I could have gone to my board of directors or to my shareholder to say, the deduction code is just a matter of time. I didn't do that. We needed to do something. We needed to act. So we also need to watch for repeated exception, particularly when the government start talking about it, then you know fire is coming, fire is on the mountain. And so what we have done is to look at how can we fix it through diversification strategy. So don't wait for newspapers headlines to come. The key is to have those stress tests in your business model that need to be done ongoingly, to listen directly to your stakeholder. That is critical. To also action those matters arising. It can be through your monthly meetings. It can be through the board of directors meetings. That is critical. So what is also critical is those emerging risks that must be given as much attention as your current profit. If you prioritize profit over risk, you are doomed, I'm sorry to say. So risk and profit should receive equal attention. So a boardroom that is always comfortable might not be a healthy boardroom. You must watch out for those smooth talkers. So respectful discomfort is often the sound of good governance working.
Thank you.
Yeah. If I can add, thank you for that. Like I said, I'm here to hear from the good doctor. I think one of the signs that I've observed, certainly, and I've served on multiple boards, is groupthink. When there's a certain individual on the board who calls all the shots, and they are very dominating, and they make the decisions outside of the boardroom, and when they come in the boardroom, they had already lobbied, and that decision has already been made without considering all the facts objectively. That's the first sign. What that essentially does is that it erodes the relationship between board and management. And when that relationship is eroded, that's the first sign that the organization is headed for decay. Because once you have a demoralized management, that will permeate across the rest of the organization. The third layer is the employee morale. It's important that we continue. I know Deloitte used to have these wonderful surveys. I think the Deloitte Best Company to Workforce and Satisfaction Survey, and they stopped it at some stage. Those are the first, because there's no more honest employee than an anonymous employee. They'll tell you exactly what's happening in the organization. So listening to what's happening on the ground and going beyond the board and management, I think you would be able to pick up those sirens before they become a huge minefield.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it is important to listen to the people that are affected, in terms of early signs. I wanted you to unpack a little bit more what you meant with, because we're talking about early signs of crisis about to happen. And you said, when you have groupthink, or because that sounds, so the way I would hear that is when there's groupthink, that could lead to crisis. But if there's already a crisis brewing, how would that be an indicator, the groupthink or a manager?
Yeah.
Voice.
Yeah. So the crisis I'm referring to here is board management erosion.
Right.
And in terms of trust. That is the biggest crisis you can have in any organization, when the board and management are not singing from the same hymn sheet. There's no greater crisis than that. It's worse than the financial crisis, because it's going to culminate in a financial crisis eventually.
Yeah.
And other crises as well. So that's the context.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's how I understood as well, that it can then start its own crisis for sure. My next question, we're really running through this conversation, is you spoke to that already, but I want you to talk about it in terms of how you would advise maybe other leaders, because Lesego came out of this this disruption. Your reputation is still intact, your purpose is still remaining, and so on, and your stakeholder relationships also seem intact. What is the single most important governance decision that you made during that period? I know you mentioned quite a lot. And then what is that one that you would recommend to any leader facing a similar situation?
So I don't think it's about I, but it's more about my team and I, and my team is here today. So what we did when we heard about this payment deduction management system, we refused to treat the disruption as a temporary thing, and simply we refused to wait for old normal, or maybe we are returning back. So just like an example where if the bridge on your usual road collapse, right? You can't wait. You have to do something. Remember between Rehoboth and Windhoek, that bridge that collapsed, immediately the government and the management took action. So you need to, what we did from our side is engaging. You need to engage those responsible for the breach that need to be sorted out. So we continue to have stakeholder engagement up to today. We continue to accelerate our diversification strategy, our innovation, our operational changes. So we also move from asking, how do we create yesterday, or how do we recreate yesterday? We start saying, what must we do about tomorrow? Moving from yesterday to tomorrow. Imagine every time if I have to have a discussion with the Minister of Finance to ask, but Minister of Finance, why? You move forward because there are greater opportunity forward. So we were very unapologetic with the team. We look at a Connect 2030 strategy that is coming that I'm very excited about. So when I look at governance, it must really help the organization to adapt to the future and not to defend the past. And this is where I'm standing.
That's really good. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, no. Just perhaps to add, one of the best things you can do is to rally as a collective, board and management, and simplify the problem. Instead of saying debtors, saying rather say, who owes us? Simplify the problem.
Oh, right, right.
Yeah, so it's very important to break the problem down and understand what exactly you're facing and the magnitude of that challenge before you pursue it.
This is really good. So what I'm hearing you say is quickly accept and then adapt. And something that we also talk about in governance is that a lot of boards are really past facing. They want to look at the reports, what happened, but it's important to look at the
Move forward.
To forward. I think
Yes.
Patrick Chisanga at the masterclass, he said he talked about that's why what is the thing called of the car, the front one? Is the windshield. That's why it's bigger than your rearview mirror because you're supposed to look forward. So that's really good. I hear that. Are there other comments from a beautiful audience here from online? Do we have virtual online comments, questions?
Yes, we do have rather just a contribution from Mr. Salom, who said the wisdom in this room is equivalent to the higher certificate in corporate governance.
100%. I think it's like a PhD situation. Thank you so much, Mr. Salom. Salom or Solomon? Solomon. Thank you, Mr. Solomon, wise king. Augusto.
Indeed, it takes the right horse on the right track for it to win. Meaning, indeed, leadership is called to each season. In the season of summer, we need a leader. In the season of winter, we need to embrace. In the season of spring, we need to grow. We need to grow because it's springing. So what it means is, of course, we looking at governance, the board, as well as the executive. It's really to understand the state of the organization, what we're really going through, and where we're headed. Indeed, governance is forward-looking, while also appreciating the lessons of the past.
Sure.
However, thinking pre-mortem, which is the black box thinking, if there's anything that is done really well, it's the aviation industry. They keep a black box in the airplanes and really learning through failure and really learning forward that it's really through our failures and crises that our characters are shaped. It's during these seasons that we are really called to stand up and really man up as leaders in terms of governance and providing really leadership in ambiguous terms, in the most uncertainty times. That's where really, and I really appreciate that. So it's really thinking towards a pre-mortem to say, how do we, beyond case management, the management of consequences of crisis, how do we shape our organization through the pre-mortem thinking that the project at the end, it has failed. What can we do today to make things better? And that I would like to bring the aspect of ecosystem thinking, where we really need to think about, not just about lack of accountability, but the environment around which enables us to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Augusto. Is there another comment? That's really good, though. Thank you so much for contribution.
Thank you very much. I have a question for
Please
Mr.
give us your name.
Oh, my name is Ndafa Shapaka, Lethecha Holdings. So my question is for Mr. Shiwana. We had unpacked intensively about transparency in corporate governance when it comes to crisis management. My question is, as a public institution, how do you balance transparency with protecting sensitive information while maintaining public confidence?
Good question.
Very good. That's an interview question for governance. I hope she's not preparing to go for an interview somewhere.
I hope so. I hope not so, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's an important question. It's an important question, and that's why, I'm choosing my words here because, they're obviously sensitive information and some matters or sub judice. But as a a responsible citizen, corporate citizen, it's important that we share these learnings with the public. And my passion is really to share specifically with the youth. That's why I heed these calls.
Thank you.
Number one, I think it's important to understand what is commercially sensitive information, especially working for commercial entities, right? So sharing financial information is probably not a good idea. Number two, name dropping is a complete no-go.
Explain that.
Well, I mean, if you're going to explain a scenario, it will probably be good to caveat the name of the individual or the entity that is involved. And thirdly, it's important to elevate the conversation to a governance conversation, and then really focusing on principles and not necessarily particular cases that have the potential to prejudice an individual or an entity. I think that's really important. When you're having a conversation, that should be top of mind, and you don't just shoot from the hip. Otherwise, you run the risk of sharing information that could potentially be not only incriminating, but also painful for the organization as well.
Do you have an example of what that looks like? Of how, I'm thinking if you were doing a press conference now, how one would do that. Do you have an actual example or no? I know I'm putting you on the spot right now.
Yeah. I think typically, I mean, as a public enterprise, one would want to know who do you owe, right? So we say we have this debt book, but we're not necessarily going to say we owe Tom, John, and Harry, right? So you need to sort of caveat
Would
those.
you say the numbers, how much you owe though?
For sure, and that's what we've done.
Okay.
I mean, of course, you know, if you go on the internet now and you search Shiwana Ndeunyema, the number is right there next to my name.
Yeah.
But that comes with the territory that you know, leadership is not a popularity contest. It's really about being honest and taking full accountability, even for storms that you did not necessarily create.
Yeah.
And of course, also allowing others to take you know, sort of credit for the sun when it essentially shines. So I think that's really important when you having these kinds of conversations. And I must credit the facilitator for managing it very, very sensitively, specifically for myself coming from a public enterprise, as well as Esther, who's probably got her investors watching and listening. What exactly is she saying? What is she not saying? So I think kudos to you.
Thank you. No, I say we're not trying to be controversial or trying to be a tabloid, having, you know, tabloid-like conversations. We want to focus on the governance learnings and some of those. So thank you for also being good hosts or guests here on the thing. Are there any other comments? We're about to wrap up. Yes.
Good evening. Paulus here. Mine is more a contribution and a question, especially on, I think everything that I'm hearing is that it's mostly encapsulated by emotional intelligence. And everywhere you go, obviously we're all coming from different backgrounds and stuff like that. So the question here is, how do you ensure good governance, especially when it comes to crisis, in ensuring that everybody obviously has their own beliefs, and emotional intelligence it's not something that you just teach easily, right? So how do you ensure as a leader that people understand your perspective, and they, obviously we always say that leadership is influence, but mostly many times people always take things more personally and don't see the picture, because most of the times we always say, challenge the idea, not the person. But in an African setting, mostly whenever someone is asking you a question, you always feel attacked. So how do you ensure a good governance in that aspect?
Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. Very good question. Thank you so much. Such a on-point audience.
I can add to that, but I think I alluded to earlier, you know, good corporate governance is also about transparency. If you are going through a challenge and you are hiding it away, you are doomed, because the organization that you are leading need to know It's all about transparency, and it's also about as much as you want to hide it away, then you will stand alone. But if you have those conversations to at least have a discussion what is going on, I think people will appreciate that better than hiding it away. Then it's becoming late. You know, I always say also, hiding information away can be a very costly exercise. And what can happen, by the time it becomes known out there, it's too late. And who is going to take the pain at the end of the day? The employees. Because now you have been hiding information away. Maybe the business has not been doing well, then you have to lay them off. Or additionally, another segment that is going to be impacted, that can be customers. Now you want, for example, you were hiding numbers away and you want to make this money. Who is going to pay at the end of the day? The end user, the customer. So I think transparency and really opening up to the challenges is critical. And also having those stakeholder engagement. I will say that is how you manage good corporate governance during crisis, in my view.
So, but how does one then manage the consequences of this transparency? So how people respond and how they respond to you, and the emotions that are around that. What does that look like?
It depends what those consequences, what it can be. So, but for me, it's also you can handle it on a case-by-case basis. I think that's what I will say.
Okay. Do you want to add to
that? If I can come in, yeah. So, if you go in any organization, there's a sort of banner like that with the values listed on it, and that's where we essentially meet, and that's why organizations have values.
Yeah.
So you're right, and you make a very good point that we come from different backgrounds. We are socialized differently. If we have a value on the door called respect, we have different interpretations of respect. For me, respect might mean if my elder says this, I submit. But for you, so respect might mean that if the elder is wrong, I tell you you're wrong, right? So I love to deal in concepts, right? So the concept was emotional intelligence. So what does emotional intelligence mean? Simply the intelligent management of human emotions, not the absence of those emotions, but how do we intelligently manage them? And the best way to do that is to bring people closer to the values of the organization and have a shared understanding of what each of those values mean, because we're all socialized differently. So, and that helps people respond in any organization. So if we know that our value is respect, and what respect means is that we don't raise our voices at one another, and we don't, insult one another, for sure. How you respond should be aligned to our values, and if it's contrary to the values, then there's obviously a code of conduct that needs to take effect. Yeah.
Really good. Thank you. I'm loving my guests, such smart people. And we're about to wrap up. We're actually coming to the end, and I wanted to ask the last thing, which you even answered before I've asked it, because crisis can reveal governance gaps that were probably always there, but were not visible in the earlier or easier times. So if this governance conversation produces one thing, one commitment that boards and executives in Namibia should take away and act on, what is that one commitment that they should act on, that they should keep, that comes out of this conversation in terms of governance gaps?
I see you are looking at me and saying, want me to answer.
I'm trying to look both.
I think if that's one thing, one commitment that the boards and executive should take away, taking it from where we are in, and again, I cannot overemphasize the payment deduction management system. Critical is to build resilience before you need it. If you don't do it, it becomes a challenge. You don't need to manufacture it through crisis. The time is now. Resilience comes normally from ordinary decisions, where you are diversifying, where you are having some planned scenarios you can look at, where you are also developing your people for the future. Nowadays, we are talking about AI. Are we gearing ourselves ready, for example? Are those the conversation we are having in the boardroom? We need to look also at listening to the bad news. Sometimes we don't want to hear bad news, but it's through bad news that we can become better, that organization can become better. And we need to protect our ethical standards and act on warning signs before it's too late. So for me, disruption is unavoidable. Yesterday, it was COVID-19. Today is PDMS. What is next? So being completely unprepared is not an excuse. If you are in business, you ought to ask yourself, if this revenue line of mine, the only revenue I rely on, disappear tomorrow, what option will we have? Or will we be able to have option, or do we have to do a lot of explanation? I can guarantee you, if you are not ready, you will do a lot of explanation. So much so that you are also going to dodge from the newspaper because you don't want to hear from them. So prepare yourself now, be ready, build those resilience.
So good. Are you clocking? Thank you. Do you want to add, Ndeunyema?
Yeah, there's well said, and I don't want to spoil a good soup by adding additional sugar. Or
Nutmeg always works. Nutmeg always works.
Yeah, so the flip side also works. Crisis also builds resilient cultures. So sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the most resilient institutions today, they are a product of crisis, because they've been there, done there, and governance also exposes, or crisis also exposes weak governance.
100%.
So it creates an opportunity for you to build an even more resilient culture and governance architecture. So it goes both ways, really.
Thank you so much. Such good closing remarks, and I think we're about to end right now. And what I heard tonight, I hope the takeaways are: silence is a no-no. Let's not be silent. It's better to give the bad news and give it as quickly as possible. It's also important to look ahead. I mean, what came out is, let's build resilience. Build resilience before you need it. I think there's an insurance company that says, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Sounds like something like that. So disruption is unavoidable. So let's prepare for it. But the big thing, and one of the outcomes of the King Code is, ethical culture. So values. So values don't change when you're going through crisis. It is just the speed of the decision making that is changing. So I hope we really heard well. And again, before we close up, I just want to again thank you so much for 91 who made this possible. Thank you for being our partner in this Fireplace Conversations. And thank you so much, audience. You've been fantastic, almost as good as my guests. And thank you for those who are tuning in, and I hope you share it. And when you take pictures of us, please tag us and follow us on our social platforms. Thank you again, guests. Wow, you were really phenomenal. If I could stand up and I'll give you a round of applause. I mean, a standing ovation, I would, but then the camera would cut my head off. So thank you so much. Have a good night. Thank you for being here tonight. And that's a wrap from us.
I'm Kuveri Sharondo, Marketing and Stakeholder Engagement Officer at the Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance, NICG for short. We are pleased to invite you to the next edition of our Fireplace Conversations, where we bring together experts and thought leaders to unpack key governance issues shaping Namibia's future. Join us as we unpack governing in crisis, exploring how boards, executives, and organizations can apply sound governance principles during periods of financial distress, business disruption, institutional pressure, and uncertainty. Host Edla Kaumbi will be joined by Dr. Esther and Shiwana Ndeunyema for this important conversation. Tune in at 18:30 to watch it live on the NICG and the Namibian Facebook pages, or to attend in person, reserve your seat by contacting 081 666 8645 or email training.events@nicg.org.na. Fireplace Conversations is proudly supported by 91 Namibia.